Alrighty. Wait, why the fuck am I not using my futon? I literally got this whole fucking setup for like the past, I don't know how many weeks, just so I can get this whole shot situated. Now, I could have just been fucking sitting on my... Alright, you know what, fuck it. I've been making this video for so fucking long. I already got this whole fucking setup right behind me here for this fucking chair instead of my goddamn futon. I have been looking forward to making this video. So here's the story. It's roughly 2009 to 2010. I'm a 10-year-old kid in elementary school, 2 years away from discovering your school is going to be shut down and turned into an extension of the monopolistic state of affairs, and 2 years after I began my unhealthy obsession with the blue hedgehog that can outrun Usain Bolt. Jesus, where did I get that fucking joke from? Was it like 2014? When it came to video games, I was mainly a Nintendo kid by this point. I had a Game Boy Advance, a Nintendo DS, I had just gotten my Wii for Christmas, and somehow didn't absolutely annihilate my CRT with the Wii U. I was always aware of the existence of other consoles, obviously. I played a bunch of PS2 games at my grandparents' house. I had played Halo before on 360 at my friend's house with them.
I'm lagging. I'm like 3 seconds below behind everybody.
You fucking trash.
I'd seen several games coming out for every system imaginable except for the Wii. No, I do not want a free Microsoft Editor browser extension. What the fuck? I didn't really get a quote-unquote mainstream console until I got my own Xbox 360 in Christmas of 2011. I say this because it was all the more impactful for me when around 2009 my grandparents and uncles got themselves a PS3 with a bunch of games. And at the time, it was my first true introduction to what the next generation was like and capable of. I wanted to try it out immediately, obviously, except most of the games were M-rated stuff that my parents wouldn't let me play at the time. So that left me with very few T-rated options. And looking through my grandparents' games, there was one particular game that stood out to me. A game that launched with the system called Uncharted Drake's Fortune. I immediately put that shit down, saw Prince of Persia 2008 and played that instead.
Alright, I'll go first. But hey, no staring at my ass. I felt you looking.
I thought you'd lost your ass.
Donkey. I can feel you looking.
You ever have those franchises that you're crazy into but never really experienced for yourself until much later, if at all? Persona 5 fans.
My wife left me.
Uncharted was one of those franchises for me for the longest time. I was familiar with the series, but never really got into it until around 2012 to 2013, I believe, when I read the book The Fourth Labyrinth for a middle school paper. This book was more or less my real introduction into Uncharted, an adventure series following the international thief Nathan Drake and his band of allies that accompanied him. I'm not as crazy into it as I once was, but at the time I fell in love with the games, the world, and probably most importantly the characters. It was like I was experiencing this generation's Indiana Jones. So I played a bit of Drake's Fortune finally on my grandparents' PS3 around this time. I didn't get too far into it and I moved on to other games. Now, it didn't really have anything to do with the game's quality, more so I just ended up being pretty focused on a lot of other stuff at the time. So yeah, I didn't even get to experience the games until I finally got a PlayStation 4 in 2017 and finally got not fucking drop my shit. And that following summer I ended up getting these and Uncharted's pretty great. The first Uncharted does have some issues, but it was still carried by its fun story and characters, and I ended up liking it a lot more than when I first played it back in 2013. Uncharted 2, well, come on, it's Uncharted 2. Improves everything from the first game, has better character moments, much better action set pieces. Yeah, objectively speaking, there's good reason this is considered one of the best games of its generation. Among Thieves didn't end up becoming my favorite though. That honor went to Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. And once again, the big thing that kept me enticed here was the story and characters. I love this game's story. I love how much more personal it is for both Nate and Sully. I love how it wraps up the arc with Nate and Elena. I love the action set pieces a lot more in this one, like the iconic plane sequence. This game is up there with my favorites.
Subway!
Uncharted 4. Okay, this one's weird to me. I mean, gameplay-wise, it's the best in the series by a landslide, and the story and characters are all great as ever, but I don't know, something about this game feels missing. I'm almost positive this has something to do with the creator, Amy Pascal, stepping out of the project and Neil Druckmann taking over. It's like A Thief's End is both connected and disjointed from previous games. It doesn't really have that same charm or flair that the first three had. Not to say it's bad, the game is still really great, but you can definitely tell it feels tonally different in a lot of ways, especially if you play them back to back. I haven't finished Golden Abyss or Lost Legacy though, because number one, I keep forgetting I own a PlayStation Vita, and number two, because I hate women. I can't say these fucking jokes with a straight face, Jesus Christ. Now the reason I'm telling you all of this is just so you know, like, I'm coming from an actual place of passion, because, you know, Uncharted was, at least at one point in my life, like, a very big part of my life. I was crazy into Uncharted when I was a teenager. So then, when you can read the title and know this is obviously talking about, you know, the movie adaptation, you know I'm speaking from genuine passion when I talk about how terrible this movie is. Holy shit, guys. The Uncharted movie is bad. It has been quite a long time since I've seen an adaptation completely miss the mark on adapting its source material in such a long time. From its story, to its writing, to its action, to its characterization, this movie misses the mark so much on what makes Uncharted great. So before I get into actually talking about how bad this movie is, I feel like I have to talk about the production behind this because Jesus fucking Christ, the production of this movie. Like, this movie has been in development for 14 years. Like, it's been in development since 2008. So the very first iteration, this was going to be written by Thomas Dean Donnelly and Joshua Oppenheimer and directed by David O. Russell, and the film was going to adapt the first game. It was also around this time, too, that actor Nathan Fillion showed he was interested in playing Nathan Drake, something that fans quickly picked up on and started to want. And believe me, we'll be talking about Fillion's involvement, or I guess lack thereof, in this review later on. Mark Wahlberg was also involved with the film at this point around 2010 in talks to play Nate. Think about that too, he was originally going to play Nate, but so much time passed in development that he got the role of Sully instead. In 2011, Russell leaves the project and goes on to direct Silver Linings Playbook instead. So after this, director Neil Berger was later reported to be stepping in, and the film completely restarted from scratch with a new script from Marianne and Cormac Wibberley, until Berger left in 2012 to direct Divergent instead. Now, stuck in limbo again, Seth Gordon became attached as director with a new script by David Guggenheim and Mark Bowl. Things finally seemed to be in motion, with a finished script and a production set to start in 2015 with a 2016 release, until summer of 2015 when Seth Gordon left to direct Baywatch instead. And while I wasn't able to find it, apparently a version of this script also leaked online after the Sony Pictures hack in 2015 as well. So, after being stuck in limbo again, and having Joe Carnahan reportedly writing a new script, Sean Levy signs on to direct the film in October of 2016, months after its first scheduled release date. Filming was supposed to begin in early 2017, that didn't happen, big shock, but the film finally got its concrete Nathan Drake casting in Tom Holland, and it would serve as a prequel to the games. Trust me, we'll get into that. Around this time, Rafe Jenkins was hired to work on the script further, until December 2018 when Sean Levy left to direct Free Guide instead. Are you seeing a pattern here yet? A month later, Dan Trachtenberg was signed on to direct with a December 2020 release date set. Yeah, guess what? He left in August 2019. Travis Knight was then hired a month later to direct, and what a shock, he left in December of 2019. The film was pushed back again. So finally, in January 2020, the film would get its director with Zombieland and Venom director Ruben Fleischer. Art Markham and Matt Holloway would be added to script writing, and more cast members such as Antonio Banderas would join the film. So finally, everything was set to begin. Filming began in mid-March, and then the pandemic happened and shut everything down. So yeah, filming didn't resume until July 2020, had some hiccups as cast members tested positive for COVID, before finally wrapping up filming in October 2020. And then it had some reshoots in July 2021, and then finally, after 14 years, 8 writers, 7 directors, multiple delays, and a whole pandemic, Mark Wahlberg graduates from playing Nate to playing Sully, and the film finally released in February of 2022. In all honesty, I'm kind of surprised that this movie even got finished in the first place, because, like, with all of that production behind it, like, how did this movie just not get outright canceled? Like, the pandemic delay is one thing. I don't think we can blame anyone for the film getting delayed for that reason. But this movie was in development for, I will stress again, 14 years. I mean, I'll give credit to everyone involved for sticking with the film this long. This could not have been a fun thing to juggle around so much for so long. But at the same time, you'd think Sony at this point would realize they should just cut their losses and realized, hey, every single director here has left and gone on to make much better careers for themselves. Maybe this film is just cursed. Now, with all that said, let's not waste any more time and get right into the film. The film opens up with the iconic plane sequence from Uncharted 3, and to the film's credit, this sequence isn't that bad in isolation. It's shot decent enough. I do like some clips from Tom Holland for a brief moment.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry! That was purely reactive!
And it even ends with Tom Holland getting run over by a car and dying, so the film can end early.
Come on!
Yeah, I'm of course kidding, but this sequence transitions to a flashback to 15 years out of nowhere? Is that Sam? Wait, why are we opening with a sequence from Uncharted 3 and transitioning to Uncharted 4 within the first few minutes of the film? And this becomes the first major problem with the Uncharted movie. This film pulls so many elements, plot points, and set pieces from across all the franchise games. Not just one, not maybe two, all four of them. Now, to a new viewer, this might not seem that bad, but when you think about these things in context of the games, it slowly starts to fall apart. In the most surface level way I can explain right now, Uncharted is a meshed up mess of the entire franchise, and that's a problem. Many of these are plot points or details that were revealed gradually throughout the franchise to help with its world building and its character building. Here though, in the film, they want to have their cake and eat it too by paying tribute to every single game in the series. And as a result, there's no compelling build up to any of these characters or this world like there was in the games. In this sequence, Nate and Sam break into a museum to steal a map made by Magellan. So in the games, Nate and Sam showed they were very capable thieves. We see this in 3 with a younger Nate, and we see this in 4 with both of the brothers. They're not perfect, but they're still smart enough and capable enough to handle their own. In the film, Sam tries to pick a lock, sets off the alarm, and they immediately get caught by the cops. Outstanding movie. So in context to the film, this makes Sam leave Nate behind so he can avoid getting arrested. He leaves behind Nate's iconic Sic Parvis Mava necklace, promising to come back for him. And we then cut back to present day, right before the plane sequence, where Nate transforms into Tom Holland. And yes, I'm gonna keep calling him that because let's just get this out of the way right now. This is not Nathan Drake. And I don't really think this is Tom Holland's fault. He is a very good actor. His Spider-Man is my favorite live action iteration of the character. But he was so unbelievably miscast as Nate in this film. He doesn't have any of the charm that Nate has from the games, and we get this on full display as early as this bartending scene. Nate goes on this monologue about the historical context, but look at how he expresses and delivers it.
First made in 1919 for Count Camillo Negroni when he swapped the soda water in his usual drink, the Americano, for gin.
This doesn't feel like Nate. This sounds like someone who's bored out of their minds at their late night shift. Compare that to one of Nate's first monologues in the first game.
He captured their ships. He took all their maps, their letters, their journals, and he recorded everything in this diary.
So this...
But when he got back to England, Queen Elizabeth confiscated all of his charts and logbooks, including this one, and then swore his entire crew to silence.
Yeah, so this...
You see, Drake discovered something on that voyage, Sully. Something so secret and so valuable, they couldn't risk it getting out.
All right, Nate, just pretend for a minute that I don't really care about any of that stuff and cut to the chase, would you?
I'm an inventor.
Nate just goes on and on and on. He can't stop talking about all this history behind what they just found. He's so passionate that Sully tries to interrupt him multiple times, but he just keeps going. Tom doesn't match that same charisma that Nate had for a large portion of this movie. There are moments, and I'll highlight them as they happen, but Tom Holland struggles to maintain any sense of that charisma that Nate has in the games. Well, nice shot of him stealing this woman's bracelet at least, and credit to Tom, at least he actually tries in this role. Oh, hi Mark.
Victor Sullivan. You can call me Sully.
Yeah, for as much as I don't like Tom in this movie, Mark Wahlberg is much worse for reasons I'll get into as I go along this review. So because Tom is so hyper-fixated on this bracelet he stole for some reason that Mark stole back from him, he goes to meet him in his apartment. So ironically enough, in this scene, I actually do get a bit of a sense for why Mark was originally intended to play Nate when the film first started production. Just compare Tom and Mark and how they delivered their dialogue concerning Magellan's expedition.
They offered Magellan his grand voyage of exploration, so long as he came back with that gold. How much gold? Today's dollars? 5 billion easy.
It's the biggest treasure that's never been found.
Tom sounds so deadpan and almost annoyed. Meanwhile, Mark has a hint. Just a hint of enthusiasm when he talks about the implications of finding Magellan's gold. It isn't perfect, but I can see why early on he was cast as Nate. Given enough time and the right script and crew, I think maybe he could have been a decent Nate. But nah, somehow we have to believe this is Sully, and we get this weird mishmash performance from Mark of Nate, Sully, and most importantly, just Mark playing himself like he does in almost all of his other movies. Also, all of these plot points that they've been bringing up about Magellan and how the story revolves around finding his lost treasure, put an asterisk on that and keep that in the back of your mind. There's something concerning this specific part of the story I want to get into towards the end of the review, so just hold on to that.
Hey, look, I don't know what happened between you two, but I think if we find that gold, there's a real good chance we find him too.
So I guess part of the reason why Mark is so eager to get Tom involved with this heist is because he knew Sam. And I suppose I'll give credit to the film for trying to explain this a little better, since they never really elaborate on Sam's whereabouts in the context to Uncharted 3, or well, the first 3 games as a whole from what I can recall. But it kind of undercuts the whole foundation for Nate and Sully's relationship for the film. In the game, Sully sees potential in Nate and thinks he can help turn him into something greater than he is. And while Nate's hesitant at first, he ultimately accepts it, as in terms of the games, this is the first time someone besides his brother sees potential in him like this.
You got talent, but you got a lot to learn. You stick with me and I'll teach you a few things.
But in the film, the foundation for this relationship is totally different. There's something so sterile and transactional to Nate and Sully's relationship for most of this first film compared to how they meet and eventually become friends in the games. Oh yeah, and here's one major example of why Mark is so miscast here.
I assume we're 50-50, right?
50-50? On what, the gold?
Yeah.
Are you high? You know, this has been years of my life. You get 10%, and that's me being generous.
Wow.
He doesn't talk or act like Sully. You could trade this for almost any other performance Mark has done and you wouldn't tell the difference. Since when has Sully acted this pessimistic? I mean, I guess the cat scene is kind of funny.
Just for you.
What?
Yeah. Life seems super sad.
No, I'm not gonna keep this thing.
This does seem like something Nate would do to Sully to mess with him, and oh, whoop, the scene's over. All right, cool then. That's fine, cool. All right.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear him sitting right next to you.
Comedy.
So Tom and Mark go to this auction to steal one of the keys they need to get to Magellan's treasure, and here we get introduced to Antonio Banderas' character Santiago Moncada, who is honestly one of the few highlights of this film. While he's definitely a far cry from the villains of the games, he really manages to hold his own in this film. He has an intimidating presence from the very beginning, and like Uncharted's best villains, he knows his history too.
Well, he's one of a kind, solid gold altar crucifix. Handcrafted in Barcelona in the early 16th century, so yes, yeah, it's pretty cool, yeah.
Wow. You know your crosses.
I could honestly see this guy being a good villain in one of the games, given the right amount of time and development. It is one of the few things I do genuinely think this movie gets right. The problem is, we get very, very little of him throughout the entire film. So to kind of jump the gun here, this film does a lot with different thieves stabbing each other in the back, and as a result, it doesn't really feel like there's a centralized villain for a lot of this movie. Antonio Banderas dominates the scene when he shows up, but this isn't considering how much the film does very similar things with Sully in this film. You're constantly at ends as to who is going to screw Tom over, or vice versa, and you're gonna hear me say this a lot in this review, it gets messy. In the games, a character like, for example, Chloe, worked because in Uncharted 2, she was the only wild card in play in the entire story. She was someone to keep Nate on his toes because you never knew if she would backstab you, the villains, or both. And that's the key thing. Uncharted 2 only had one wild card. The Uncharted movie has like 3 or 4, and it feels so unfocused as a result. Everyone's racing for the same thing, but you never root for anyone to get it except for Tom, and that's only by virtue of him being the central character of the film.
I'm pretty sure he's just threatening to kill me.
Don't touch your ear like that. You look like an idiot. Get a move on.
Okay.
But hey, we do get one of the few very great moments from Tom here.
I shouldn't come out to play with the big boys, Wayne, because you're about to get a proper Scottish welcome.
I live in Smethwick, Birmingham. If you want the fucking brawl, come down Smethwick, Hospitality G, or come out of my house.
I'm sorry?
You know the
Whoa. I literally have no idea what you're saying.
I don't have too much to say. This scene isn't half bad.
I think that's a little rude. I think I should be asking you the questions if I'm honest. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do you one better. I'm gonna get my lawyer to ask the questions, starting with who installed that handrail? I mean, look at that.
So Tom and Mark steal the cross and continue on with their journey to Barcelona, and God, I hate this dialogue between them on the plane.
And then told him and Cotters that the trip was a bust.
Okay, well, you have any bright ideas on how to use the keys?
So, we're looking for a tree.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's your expert analysis?
Well, you just gave me the book like an hour ago. What am I supposed to do?
Shove it up your ugly ass! Go to hell!
It's so pessimistic. Why do neither of these characters attempt to have or show the same charm as their game counterparts? Yeah, Nate and Sully sometimes bicker back and forth, but in every game, even in Uncharted 3, after they first meet, it's clearly playful banter. Tom and Mark, for so many interactions in this film, are just fighting. Nothing to build chemistry off of, nothing to progress their relationship. For most of the movie, it's just like this. So the two reach Barcelona and they meet...
Hey, Chloe.
Who the hell is this?
Chloe. Okay, this further accentuates two problems with the movie. One, why is this film throwing in and reworking so many clashing elements from all of the games this much? The background and context for why Chloe is here is totally different from the games. And look, I know it's probably getting annoying hearing me constantly compare this to the games. And I understand adaptations usually have to make changes, but if you're adapting a work, be it a video game, a book, a comic, whatever, your goal should be to include changes that make sense while still staying true to the nature of what you're adapting. Uncharted has no idea what it's trying to adapt. Which game is this film trying to pull from? Because you can't just throw in all these different characters, plot points, and moments across from the entire franchise and hope it turns into one cohesive film. These elements were separate in each game for good reason. So to compare this to another adaptation, I'm going to talk about The Last of Us for a second. Now, I don't know if this review is going to come out before or after I put out my Last of Us TV show review, and as you'll soon find out, I'm kind of mixed about how I feel about that show. But for as mixed as I feel about this show, and as much as there are several certain creative changes and liberties it takes that I really don't like, it still follows the same general structure and story of the original game. There are differences, and there are a lot of differences I don't really like, but it doesn't drastically change too much from the more central plot points or the more central overarching narrative. It doesn't stray away from Joel and Tess getting hired to smuggle Ellie. It doesn't stray away from the Raider Town and Sam and Henry dying. It doesn't stray away from Joel trying to offload Ellie to Tommy after he finds him. What central plot points does Uncharted take? It takes Nate's backstory with Sam from Uncharted 4. It abridges Nate and Sully's first time meeting and working together from 3. It takes the plane sequence from 3. It abridges Chloe from 2 and brings her in as a wild card. There is absolutely nothing here reminiscent of the first game. So what's the structure here? And on that note of a wild card, once again, this is another problem with bringing Chloe into the film. That makes for 3 in this film that Tom has to deal with. He has to deal with Mark, he has to deal with Mercado, and now he has to deal with Chloe. Why is there no focus here?
Check your bag, do it now. Shit.
You just lost the game.
Chloe steals the cross from Tom, we get more fighting between Tom and Mark, and Tom, out of fucking nowhere, brings up some pretty crucial knowledge to this scavenger hunt to convince Chloe to work with them.
You're looking for a tree, right? The 18 were willing to wait years to go back for the gold. They wouldn't have picked a tree as a marker. They would have picked something more permanent.
You know, in any other Uncharted game, Nate would have figured this out during one of his many monologues he goes off on whenever he brings up history. Here, Tom just suddenly figures it out when the plot tells him it's important. No build up to him figuring this out beforehand, no hints of him realizing the pine tree actually represents a church, nothing. If this was any more contrived, you probably convinced me this was The Last of Us 2.
Hole in one!
So after this, we get this scene with Mercado visiting a site where his father is, and tells his henchwoman Joe Braddock to hunt down Mark, and okay, looks like that scene's done. Was this script proofread? Why are there moments like this that feel so rushed? Was this a result of the reshoots? What purpose does this scene give us? That Mercado is after Nate and Sully? Well, yeah, no shit. So if they're gonna give us a scene establishing that, why only make it this short? Why not use that as a way to establish Mercado as a more intimidating villain in some way? Look, I know I'm probably reading way into this, but I'm sorry, I think it's a severe issue when your film was in development for almost a decade and a half, and you still have scenes that somehow feel this rushed. I do like this bit where Tom chugs the wine down and Mark quips about it.
Chug it down, like you're on spring break. All good.
See, this is what kind of annoys me. There are glimmers of a great Uncharted movie somewhere here, but these moments are either rushed out like this, or we get other moments showcasing just how miscast Tom and Mark were. And to further accentuate how rushed all of this feels, we get a jump to nighttime with the trio where Tom makes some quips to Mark about his cat.
You have a cat?
The man from the app said he was gonna feed her, but he didn't text me back yet.
I don't know what's cuter. You're concerned with the fact that you just said the man from the app.
I make my own destiny.
And then we suddenly go back to Mercado where he kills his father. What is the deal with this pacing? The trio go into the church and find out where the locks to the 2 cross keys are, and...
Shit! Thanks a lot. You almost got me killed. Clockwise, Sully! Well, it was 50-50, so I made a guess.
A guess? That could have been our heads.
Well, clearly she turned the keys the other way.
Oh, for Christ's sake, can we just have one scene where these characters aren't fighting in some form or fashion like this? Its dialogue and delivery sounds and feels so mean-spirited throughout this entire film. It's so annoying.
You have so many apps open. What is wrong with you?
Want a break from the ads?
I guess the Tinder line is kind of funny, though.
Tinder? Really? I own that.
Did this goofy-ass motherfucker right here just compliment that female?
Look, I'm trying to scrape for credit where credit's due, alright?
Hey, I got an arrow pointing this way.
The eye of providence. I say we go with God.
But there's literally an arrow that points this way. I'm gonna go this way. Yeah, we should go your way. We should go your way.
Pussy! So Tom and Chloe continue onward down the tunnel only to find a rave. A club built into the part of the church they need to go to? Well, that's a bit anticlimactic, and how did Mercado's henchmen know to find them down here? There's obviously no indication anyone knows this secret passageway leads to this club, and they didn't trail Tom and Chloe from behind them. What, did they just get lucky? Jesus Christ, I'm starting to sound like nostalgia critic here. That's what this movie's making me do. Well, at least the bar fight is kind of neat. It's choreographed decently, and Tom throws in some actually funny lines in there. And just for a small split second, I actually bought him as Nate.
Easy in the sunshine.
Okay, I got it. Sex on the beach.
Too bad it's followed by Mark Wahlberg doing one of his most Mark Wahlberg things in the movie.
Excuse me, guys?
So we get a fight between Mark and Braddock. The two keys are eventually turned, and Tom and Chloe make it out of the water trap. They find Magellan's stash with the two keys, and it's salt. Probably a pretty accurate representation of what everyone is feeling watching this movie right now. Tom finds a map and figures out the gold was actually stored in the East Indies, to which Chloe promptly betrays the both of them. Shocking.
You don't even really know what went down.
Went down with what?
Sam, who do you think?
She also brings up Sam, which makes him lose his guard and have Mark come by and berate him.
I tried to warn you about her, but you didn't want to listen, did you?
Only for Tom to find out from him that he left Sam to die, and...
I thought maybe he said something to you or sent you something. I mean, shit, all he ever did was talk about you.
So that's what this is about. You dragged me all the way out here. Let me believe that I might see my brother again because you think that I know something?
Yeah. Do you?
Fucking hell, dude. Okay. So like I said, I do at least like that they tried to explain certain things in this film in context to the film's universe when it wasn't in the games, like how Sam is implemented in all of this. But let me get this straight. This is where you lead it to. So not only do these versions of Nate and Sully have almost no chemistry together, but now we get the revelation that Sully left Sam for dead. How on earth am I supposed to buy moving forward that these two continue to work together? They spend this entire movie fighting back and forth because they didn't trust each other, and when this bombshell gets dropped on us, they set it up like it's supposed to be this big betrayal. But all it does is affirm to us how unlikable Sully is, and to jump forward a little bit, how unrealistic it is that Nate would ever continue to work with this guy. I don't know about you, but if I found out that someone like this left someone I love for dead like this, I'd be pretty fucking pissed. And Tom certainly is here. There's a lot of changes in this film that suck and don't make sense, but by far, this is easily the worst and most disrespectful in the entire film. Why do you think I keep calling these two Tom and Mark interchangeably with Nate and Sully? Because they're Nate and Sully in name only. It isn't just the performances that are the problem, it's the entire charismatic dynamic these two had is completely fucked. These characters are not Nate and Sully, and if they went by any other names, you could not convince me for a fucking second this was even an Uncharted movie. So then we get the revelation that Chloe was hired by Mercado before she met up with Tom and Mark, which, yeah, I guess that was kind of sort of a thing in Uncharted 2 with her working with the main villains, but this twist comes out of nowhere and falls on deaf ears. Especially since it feels like the script in this scene was like, oh, by the way, Chloe was working with Mercado the whole time, before it cuts away again. So I guess they also do this to explain why Mercado's goons found the two of them in the club before. But again, how would she know this path led to the club, and at what point would that even be relayed to Mercado's people in time, so that they arrive perfectly on time when Tom was with her the entire time? I know I probably sound like some fucking nostalgia critic Cinema Sins bullshit channel right now.
Scene does not contain a lap dance.
But this scene just still feels so blatantly contrived. It's so distracting. So Tom decides to work with Mark to end this whole thing before they go their separate ways, which leads us to the plane from the opening. And Mercado gives us this really great monologue discussing his motivations and why he's on the hunt for Magellan's gold.
500 years ago, my family was betrayed. A small band of explorers, they found the world's biggest fortune. And you know what? They hid it. People searched for it, all in vain. It was left to me to recover my family's gold.
This monologue is actually pretty great. It gives us a concrete reason for why he's been doing what he's doing. And as far as like character building goes, it is genuinely interesting and cool to see. So while Antonio Banderas is barely in the movie, he does give us glimmers, again, of a great Uncharted villain, which I am hopeful at the very least pays off in the third act of this film, and she gets betrayed and killed by Braddock.
Daddy was right, you don't have what it takes.
The House of Moncada dies with you.
Oh man, where do I begin? First of all, way to kill off the one good thing this movie had going for it and replace it with another twist villain. Second, what's the reason or motivation Braddock does this and the rest of Ricardo's goons do as well? We never really get a good reason as to why this happens. Third, how on earth does Chloe escape all of this for a split second when she's in clear view of everyone in this room? I'm not asking for perfection, but there's no attention to detail here. And on that note, fourth, how on earth do Tom and Mark manage to stow away on the plane through the car's trunk? Fifth, where was Chloe hiding this whole time? Look, maybe I'm digging way too deep into this movie, that's entirely a possibility, but not even considering whether or not this was an Uncharted movie, I just can't help but notice the intense lack of detail across this entire script. From the rapid cuts of different scenes like that whole cat scene, Ricardo with his father, and the trio at the hotel before investigating the church, to this whole sequence, it's like there wasn't a single person that considered how these details should be pasted and edited together, or are just totally ignored for the sake of a cool set piece. Again, to compare to another Naughty Dog adaptation, this is something The Last of Us thrives on. Every moment of that show, and especially the game, are well thought out and every one of its details are considered. Take episodes 4 and 5 for example, and what they do within the infected. We get glimpses of the infected still underneath the city, and for that matter the entire area, and Sam and Henry mention tunnels underneath the city full of infected that were supposedly cut off or killed according to them. And this is all happening on unstable grounds across the entire city. So it pays off when in episode 5, we see a truck sink to the ground and unleash a horde of infected. Even the details in dialogue pay off when the leader of the Raiders tells Henry that kids die every day, only for her to be killed by a child clicker. And this show was in development for a shorter period than Uncharted, even when you consider the production of the film that got canceled. Uncharted was in development for 14 years and had 8 writers. 8! How was there not a single writer across this entire process that took the time to think about these details? And as you may or may not see by this point, I do have issues with The Last of Us show's details as well, but those are for entirely separate reasons than this film. I guess specifically in context to Uncharted, why were the writers so selective about which details were important? Because they perfectly show how Chloe and Braddock's fight affects various stages of Tom's trek back up to the plane in the opening. But, okay, to at least shed something positive after all of that, the skydive sequence with Tom and Chloe is still pretty cool. It's shot chaotically, but focuses just enough so you can see how much they're struggling and how intense their dive is in this sequence. It feels very gamey, and I do like that.
Whoa! What the hell happened to you two?
Number 5, right? Yeah, and with pickles, and can you smush it down real flat? Thanks.
Hey, something like that happened to me once.
Subway!
So Tom decides to work with Chloe to figure out where Magellan's Gold truly is based on Sam's postcards, and finds out the keys are also a compass. And in probably the only smart move Tom does for the entire film, he expects Chloe to betray him and gives her the wrong coordinates to the treasure, while he manages to find it. Mark manages to find him thanks to the GPS tracker from earlier in the film, and the boats get found by Braddock and the rest of the mercs after she just so happens to see Nate driving a boat. We once again get a couple decent clips between Tom and Mark.
I'm not going in there.
Hey, look, you can stay up here and get shot in the head or come down here for a quick cuddle. Up to you.
And that leads up to probably one of the most over-the-top climaxes I've ever seen. Now, given some of the set pieces that have happened in the past games, especially in an Uncharted 4, I do think it would be a bit ridiculous to criticize this sequence because of that. Uncharted has had plenty of crazy sequences throughout the series, and this one really isn't any different. Across the whole film, this entire part is the closest the movie gets to feeling like Uncharted.
Hey! All hands on deck! Raise the anchor! Hoist the mainsail!
Hey, Jack Sparrow! Stay sharp!
There's something! Hey, Scungili!
The action is fun and well choreographed. There's some good dialogue with Tom and Mark. They do just about every creative thing they can do with a set piece like this. Tom's suddenly a sharpshooter when he gets his iconic gun holsters in the scene, but it still looks cool. They throw in a bit of the original Uncharted theme into the score. Took them fucking long enough to do that. The cannon shot is badass, and Braddock gets a cool death, even if she totally sucked as a villain. Mark ends up saving Tom in the process, even though they don't tie up the loose end about Mark leaving Sam for dead, but at least they have some more decent dialogue.
I wanted to say thank you for what you did for me back there. You know, ever since my brother Sam left. Can you hear me? I can now. I was just saying we should get out of here.
What? No! And the movie ends with them making off with just a bit of gold. So I guess that does beg the question, why do I dislike this entire sequence if the other Uncharted games have had similar ones that are arguably just as over the top and ridiculous? I don't give a shit about the characters. I touched on this a little bit back in my best and worst of 2022 video, but let me break this down in more detail. When you get down to a surface level understanding, Uncharted is not really that special or stand out from other adventure stories, be it games, movies, books, shows, whatever. This kind of formula has been done before, just like any other genre. Why do you think people still call this a modern day Indiana Jones? But execution is everything, and it's what makes something in a genre stand out. The reason Uncharted is so beloved by so many people isn't because of its third-person shooter gameplay. It isn't the parkour and platforming. It isn't what it borrows from other franchises like Indiana Jones. It's the characters. I haven't played the games in a long while as of writing this review, but one thing I have never forgotten about Uncharted, even to this day, is its stellar cast of characters. I remember Nathan Drake, I remember Victor Sullivan, I remember Elena Fisher, I remember Chloe Fraser, I remember Sam Drake, hell, even the villains. I remember Lazarevich, I remember Marlowe, I remember Rafe, I remember Nadine. I remember the back and forth these characters all have with each other. I remember the charisma and fun tone these games have across the series because of that charisma. I remember the witty dialogue. I remember all the times Nate and his colleagues effortlessly connect the dots between different moments and periods in history to solve whatever treasure hunt they were on. And because they're so likable and charismatic, I remember the more serious moments. I remember both times when Sully gets shot. I remember when Nate proposes to Elena. I remember when Elena finds out Nate lied to her in 4. These characters are what carry Uncharted. They're what makes this franchise special, and they're what makes this series one of the best and most beloved in gaming history. The Uncharted movie has none of that. Instead, what we have is that surface level understanding of Uncharted. An Indiana Jones clone full of characters with little to no charisma to them whatsoever, a lack of attention to detail in so many moments, a mishmash of iconic moments and characters from the whole franchise to fool you into thinking it cares about the source material, a script full of unlikable dialogue with no charm, a wasted potential of a rogues gallery, and another excuse for Hollywood to continue milking one of its hottest stars in a role that he was really not fit to play. And to top it all off, turns out Sam is still alive in some prison, and they add a post-credits scene because they really think this film is gonna get a sequel. Let's see how well that ages. At least it gives us a funny Mark Wahlberg mustache moment, though. At least it ends on that.
What is that thing on your face?
Hello, everybody. My name is Markiplier.
So this is the part where I link to you and recommend that you check out the Uncharted fan film that stars Nathan Fillion and Stephen Lang. If you're into Uncharted in any sort of way, you've probably already seen this fan film and you know just how amazing it is. And more importantly, how it outclasses this piece of shit in like every fucking way possible. Nate and Sully's dialogue is absolutely perfect. The way Nate interacts with the villains in this film got me laughing more than any quip or one-liner Tom or Mark had to say.
That's El Tigre? Thank God. Guys, whew. Seriously, you guys, you got me. You got me. That was...
Nate talking about history and connecting the dots between notable time periods, historical figures, legends, you name it, is incredibly delivered. The action sequence that kind of plays out like a third-person shooter is filmed fantastically. It's all in all everything you could possibly want out of a potential Uncharted movie, and it shocks me that Sony and other notable people involved with the franchise saw this fan film and somehow didn't decide to just give this cast and crew a budget and let them cut loose. But here's the real kicker here. Do you remember that asterisk I told you to hold on to earlier? You remember how I told you to keep in mind that plot thread about Magellan's gold being like a central thing in the movie?
He's got a whole stack of letters from Ferdinand Magellan to Albuquerque.
You know what Magellan was really looking for? Gold. But he never made it home.
Now, history is spotty on who captained it, but there was another ship called the Trinidad, a Spanish flagship, famous for having been the first to sail around the world.
Magellan. Holy shit. Magellan captained the rescue ship.
This line here shows the path that Ferdinand Magellan took to sail around the world.
First guy to do it. You know your history.
What if the reason no one has found the treasure of the Flor de la Mar is because the treasure was never on it?
It was on the Trinidad.
Exactly, it never sank. And Magellan and Albuquerque both knew it.
You know, Sam said he had a little brother who was just as into this Magellan stuff. I thought there's no way. We were getting close to Captain Elcano's tomb, but Sam was sure we'd find his journal and into the location of that gold. Then he disappears. Doesn't call, doesn't answer my text, nothing. He ghosted me.
Now, I don't want to throw unfounded accusations of plagiarism, especially when one of the writers of the final script, Rafe Judkins, was brought on in 2017 just over a year before this fan film came out. Whether or not you want to boil it down to the most inconvenient coincidence that both of these films have a central plot point that involves the treasure of Ferdinand Magellan, I'll leave that up to you. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just rubbing salt on the wound that these two are so similar in plot structure and the treasure Nate is looking for, and still, in less than 15 minutes, Alan Ungar's short film does more interesting and charismatic stuff with this material than a 2-hour, $120 million budget movie could accomplish in almost 15 years. This short film perfectly complements the games and makes me want to play them again to remind myself how great they are. Uncharted, starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, makes me want to play the games because I know I'm watching something vastly inferior. And in that sense, I have to ask, who is this movie for? It's definitely not for fans of the games. Is it to introduce new audiences to Uncharted? Because, man, they're in for a ride when they look into the games and realize they've watched something that pales in comparison. Is it just for general audiences? Because in that case, there are so many better options. Indiana Jones is already a given, especially since a new one is coming out, but hell, even when it comes to video game adaptations, Tomb Raider still does this better. Every single one of them. I wanted to like this movie. I really did. I wanted to come out of the theater being proven wrong about Tom and Mark being cast. I wanted to be proven wrong on why they were pulling so much from vastly different games. I wanted to be proven wrong on this being another bad game to movie adaptation. I saw this movie in the theaters. I wanted this to be good, but it isn't. Alright, so this next part's going to be a little bit unscripted, but if you made it this far, thank you again for watching the video, and thank you for your patience. This took way too long to make. Like, I'm hoping at this point, like, within my career, even if I am doing this as, like, a side hobby, I'm hoping I never have to make a review like this that takes this long in between videos, like, ever again. But if you like what you watch here, be sure to subscribe. I've got a Last of Us TV show review coming as well. That one is going to take a little bit longer. I do have that one mostly filmed out. I kind of just have to wait until it comes out on physical media so I can get the footage that I need in order to review it. But that review is coming out soon. I got some other review-related things. I don't know if they're lists yet or full-blown reviews yet. I'm still trying to decide on what I'm going to do next after The Last of Us. That I'll save it for after I actually finish The Last of Us TV show review. That's all on the back burner. Last of Us is next. How do I end this video? How do I end this video?